Christy. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to day 3 of my 2021 Valentine Card Series. Today I'm going to be making a card using Lawn Fawn's Pizza My Heart and A Creature Was Stirring. So I've stamped all my images out on some Neenah Solar White cardstock with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink, and I'll be coloring with my Copic markers. I'm starting with my mice, and I'm going to do the boy mouse first. I'm using W00, W1, W3, and W5. So I use the W5 to lay in some shadow down the back of his body. Since he's facing toward the right, I'm going to put his shadows on the left-hand side so it'll keep his face nice and bright. And then I'm going to blend that out with the W3, just making sure to catch the edge of that W5 to break up the pigment and create a nice smooth blend so I don't have any harsh lines. And then I'll come in with the W1 and I'm going to blend that out even further. I'm going to color most of him with that W1, so he's mainly just the darkest 3 shades there. I'll use a little of that W1 on the bottom of his belly, and then I'll finish off his belly with the W00. And I'll also add a little color to his ears and feet. And then I'm going to move on to my girl mouse. And for her, the darkest color that I'm using is the W3. I decided to make her just a little bit lighter so they weren't exactly the same. So I skipped the W5 on her completely, used the W3 for my shadows, and now I'm blending out with the W1 and just coloring the same way, except I'm flipping my light source. Since she is facing toward the left, I'm going to keep her face nice and light and do the shadows down her back. So I use the W00 to blend out her lightest parts, and then I'm going to use the R11 to color in their ears, noses, and feet, just to add a little bit of pink there and make them look extra cute. I also gave the little girl a rosy cheek. Next, I wanted to color in his little chef's hat, but I didn't want to use grays because the mice are already gray. So I grabbed E40 and E41 and just added a little bit of color there and let that fade into the white. And I'm also going to use these shades to color in the pizza box so it looks like that kind of craft color. But I'm going to be a lot more heavy-handed with the colors because I want it to look more brown. So I'm doing some flicking in with that E41 first from all of the corners, and then I'm going to blend that out with the E40. And I will let that kind of fade into the white as it gets closer to the pizza words on both the side and the top. I'm moving on now to my pizza crust, and for that I'm using E50, E51, and E53. Starting with that E53 to give it that nice golden tone, and then blending out with the E51, and then I will add the E50 for a highlight. I'm going to go back with that E53 just to add a bit more darkness and blend that out again. So I did that for the slice, and now I'm also going to tackle the heart-shaped pizza. So I'm doing the same thing. I'm putting that E53 on the inside edge of the crust because I thought that would be the most raised, so it would get, the most brown in the oven. And then blending that out with the E51 again, and just carefully going all the way around that, and making sure to go over the edge of that E53 so I get a nice soft blend. And then filling in with the E50, and I did a second layer of that off screen. And then I'm moving on to the little wooden spoon. I kept my E50 and E51 for that, and I just did a little shadow where the line is drawn on the curve of the spoon and blended out with the E50, added a bit more shadow with that E51. And now I'm going to go and try to color in the cheese. And this was kind of tricky to find a good combination that kind of looked like melty mozzarella cheese. But I ended up going with Y000 and Y21. So I just added a nice thick layer of that Y21 first, and then blended out with the Y000. and then I added more of that Y21, and I kind of worked back and forth between the two so that I got a nice kind of transition from the area that's a little more brown toward the edge, and then, you know, the kind of softer center. And I did the same thing on the heart-shaped pizza because I wanted them to be made of the same ingredients. But I did work back and forth a few times. I think I might have done about 3 layers of each of these marker shades, just to kind of really beef up that saturation and get that nice smooth blend that I always love, especially if it's on something that's not meant to be textured. So there you can see that I'm just kind of flicking that color in, because really there should have probably been a medium shade, but I just didn't find anything in my Copic collection that was going to kind of bridge the gap between the shades that I wanted. So I just went with multiple layers until I was happy with it. And then I needed just a little bit of sauce, so I grabbed YR09. That was the closest thing that I could find to like a tomato sauce. And then I blended over the edge with that Y21 again, and kind of just worked back and forth to create that look of kind of the cheese melting into the sauce along the edge. And I don't know, I am somebody who always likes to go light on the sauce. Like if I order pizza, I always ask to go light on the sauce because I just don't like too much of it. And so I kind of did a thin line to kind of represent what I personally like, but you could obviously add, you know, a bit more of a thicker line if you like a lot of sauce on your pizza. That's what's so fun about these stamps, is that you can really customize it to whatever you like. You can add the different toppings. There's so many different choices of toppings that you can add to these pizzas on these stamp sets, and so you can really mix and match and have a lot of fun creating your own style. So now I wanted to color in the pizza wheel, and I wanted that to look metallic, so I'm going to go with my cool grays. I'm using C0, C1, and C3, and I kind of did like a triangular shape opposite each other, and then I'm blending that out with the C1, so the darkest was the C3, and kind of just working over the edge and then leaving a little triangular shape that's left for that C0, and that kind of helps it look like it's maybe a bit in motion. I did go back and add a bit more of that C3 because I felt like it got lost. I just refilled my markers recently, so they're really nice and juicy, so the lighter colors like to push back the dark ones. So sometimes I'll just go over and add a bit more of the dark for more contrast. I use C3 and C5 for the little metal part that I'm coloring now, and added a bit more of that C5 again. And then I'm going to use R24 and E19 for my pepperoni. I did one off to the side to kind of test it to see if I liked this combo. I wanted something that had that kind of brownish red, and I couldn't find anything perfect by itself in my collection, but I thought these two worked really well together. I was really happy with it, especially when I went back and added an extra little bit of the E19 after I had added the R24 in the mix. I thought that was a really close color to pepperoni, so these two together I thought worked really great. So pepperoni is definitely my top choice for a pizza topping. Leave me a comment down in the description what you like to have on your pizza. If I'm allowed to have 2 toppings, it's always pepperoni and mushrooms. That is my favorite. And I also threw in the green peppers on this pizza because that is my oldest son's favorite topping. So I moved on to the stripe on the top of the pizza box, and I used R22, R24, and R29 for that. I used the R29 in the 2 corners, and I'm blending toward the center with the R24, and then I'm going to finish the middle with the R22. I wanted a red combination that was similar to the tone of the pepperoni, but different so that the pepperoni really looked distinct. So this is what I went with. And then for the green peppers, I'm using G20, G24, and G28. So I just did a little stripe of the G28 on each of those little pieces and then blend it out with the G24. And then I'm going to add in a little G20. So it's almost as if you're seeing like the edge of the pepper where it starts to get lighter. So you could also eliminate the G20 if you don't want that look. And then for the mushrooms, I decided to go with E70 and E71 because I didn't want to do anything that was similar to either the mice or the little pizza cutter. So I thought this was a good combination because it has a little bit of that earthy tone to it. And then I'm going to color in the little girl mouse's apron with BG000, BG02, and BG05. And again, I'm doing her shading on her apron just like I did on her body. I put the darkest more on the right hand side and I'm keeping the highlight over on the left. And I also did a second layer on there. I often do a second layer. I just love the way that it looks, creases that saturation and really smooths out the blend. I used BG000 and BG01 for the handle of the pizza cutter, and then I trimmed these images out with their coordinating dies. The pattern papers I'm using are from the Hello Sunshine remix. So I'm just flipping through and I wanted to choose 3 prints that I thought would work well together. So the first one I pulled out is this little pendant banner print that I thought would work really well with whatever else I could pull in. And then I have that kind of dark pinky red print. And I thought this blue gingham worked well with the other 2 as well. So I'm going to pull that out. And I'm going to trim these 3 down. So I'm going to use the outside in stitch rectangle stackables to cut down the pendant banner and the blue gingham. I also cut the stitch scalloped rectangle frames just out of another piece of neenah Solar White. And I'm going to use both the frame and the inner piece. So I'm actually going to take my 2 panels that I've trimmed down of pattern paper and glue those to the inner piece so that they have a little bit more stability. They are slightly bigger, but it won't matter in the final card. So the banner is going to become my wallpaper, and then the gingham print is going to be the tablecloth. So I adhered those to that inner piece, and then I'm going to take the frame and I'm going to add some liquid glue in a very thin bead around the edges, and I'm going to glue that in place over top to just kind of frame everything in nicely. And I set an acrylic block on that to help it dry nice and flat, and then I trimmed out that darker red piece with the large stitch rectangle stackables. I'm going to go ahead and adhere that to my card front right now. The card base that I'm using is Lawn Fawn's Guava cardstock. So I just smooth that down into place. It's going to fit over the entire A2 size card. For my sentiment, I'm just taking the rest of that piece of white cardstock that I used to color my images, and I'm going to stamp my sentiment in guava ink. And I'm using the one that says, "You have a pizza, my heart," because I just think it's so cute. So I did stamp that down twice to make sure I had a nice bold impression, because this ink does dry back just a little bit. And then I'm going to do an insert for the inside of the card since the cardstock is a darker color, so it's a little bit hard to get your stamped ink to show up on unless you're going to do like a black ink or something. So I did the little mouse from A Creature Was Stirring that has the pot holders and the slice of pizza and the sentiment that says, "No matter how you slice it, you're the greatest." And then I did a few toppings on that piece of pizza as well. I backed my focal panel with some foam tape so it would give it a little bit of lift on the card. I'm going to center that on the card base and then press that down into place. The next thing I'm going to adhere is my sentiment, because I want to make sure that I have my placement of my images just right. I trimmed that down with the largest of the everyday sentiment banners, added a bit of foam tape to the ends, and then used liquid glue for the part that would go over the focal panel. So I just line that up at the bottom, and now I'm ready to set my little scene. I'm going to adhere the pizza box down at the bottom closest to the sentiment. So again, that blue gingham is going to be like a tablecloth, and then the pendant banner is the wallpaper that is behind the table. Next, I'm going to add my heart-shaped pizza, and I'm just going to have it kind of standing at the edge of the tablecloth so that the little mice can be holding it up as they are decorating it. So I've got the little chef mouse over on the left-hand side, and he's kind of supporting it on that side there with his hand that's kind of outstretched. And then I've got my little girl mouse, and she is reaching to add that little piece of pepper on there. Next, I was trying to figure out where I wanted that slice of pizza to go and which direction I wanted it to have it kind of tipped. But once I decided, I just added a bit of liquid glue to the back of that and adhered it, overlapping that sentiment strip just a bit to kind of just integrate the whole thing a little more into the scene. And then I was going to have the chef mouse holding the pizza cutter, but I wasn't sure if it was kind of too big and covered up too much of the pizza. So I kind of changed my direction there and had it go down on the right-hand side of the card and gave him the wooden spoon instead, which I had intended to go where the pizza cutter is. So I adhered that into his two hands so that he can be adding the sauce to the pizza, and then I glued that pizza cutter down, overlapping that sentiment strip as well. And then the little piece of pepperoni, I did have to hand cut that because there isn't a die for the toppings. I had originally planned to put it in her hand, but then her hand was just like perfectly placed where the pepper was. So I decided to dot the I in pizza with it, just so I didn't have to waste the time that I had used to cut out that little piece of pepperoni. So I think it looks cute there anyway. So then I'll take the insert and glue that to the inside of my card. I'm just going to line that up so that I have equal borders on all four sides, and then I'll smooth that down into place. And I decided not to add any embellishments on the outside. I thought nobody would really want to eat a glittery pizza. So I just left it as is, but I think this one turned out really cute. So I hope you guys enjoyed it too. If you did, please be sure to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Make sure that you've rung that notification bell so you always get notified when I post a new video. I post new ones every Monday and Friday, and occasional bonus videos as well. If you're interested in any of the products that I used today, you'll find those listed and linked in the description bar below. And if you'd like to keep watching, here is day 3 of the previous 2 years of Valentine Card Series. You can click on either one to check them out. I hope you all have an amazing day. Bye-bye.